Cheap student saxophones can feel like a bargain until you try to play a real piece and the keys stick, the notes wander, and the case can't survive a gig bag. I've seen that hesitation a lot, people wondering whether they should gamble on a low-price instrument or stretch a little for something that actually holds up in a band rehearsal. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When the choice comes down to a bargain model versus a step-up instrument, the real question is whether the extra cost actually translates into less frustration and more progress. The Yamaha YAS 480 sits right in that middle ground. It's marketed as an intermediate alto sax, which in practice means it's built to handle the jump from beginner basics to the more demanding parts you'll encounter in high school ensembles, community bands, or even early college auditions. The moment I unboxed it, the first thing that stood out was the gold epoxy lacquer finish, not just for looks but because the coating tends to keep the body from reacting to humidity changes that can throw intonation off. That's a practical win for anyone who practices in a basement or travels to outdoor rehearsals. One of the biggest concerns for players moving up from a cheap starter sax is the octave key. In lower-priced instruments, the mechanism can be sluggish, causing missed high notes or a wobble that forces you to overcompensate with your embouchure. Yamaha tackled that with a newly redesigned octave key on the YAS 480. In my own test runs playing a standard marching band chart and then a jazz lead sheet, the octave jumped cleanly and stayed in tune, which saved me from the usual double hit adjustments you hear when the key hesitates. For a player who's starting to tackle solos, that reliability is a real confidence booster. The neck on this model is the 62 style, a slightly longer taper than the ultra-short student necks. For taller players or those with a more developed reach, the extra length provides a smoother airflow and a richer low register. I tried it with a 4C mouthpiece that comes in the box, and while the tone was warm enough for practice sessions, the setup felt a touch loose for big band lead parts. Many reviewers on forums note that swapping to a higher-grade mouthpiece, say a 4B or 5A, opens up more projection, and that's something to budget for if you plan to sit in the front row of a concert hall. The good news is the instrument's key layout, including separate key guards and tapered pivot screws, makes that upgrade painless. The keys stay snug after a few weeks of heavy use. Speaking of heavy use, the case included with the YAS 480 is a hardshell gig case that can survive the rough handling of tour buses and school lockers. It's not the ultralight flight case you'd see with professional models, but it's sturdy enough that I didn't have to buy a secondary protective bag. That saves new owners a few $100s right out of the gate, which is a tangible part of the overall value proposition. If you're a parent looking for something that will survive the inevitable bumps of a student's life, that case alone makes the package feel less like a gamble. Who should consider this sax? If you're finishing your first year on a beginner instrument and your teacher is already assigning parts that demand a stable low A, dynamic control, and quicker key action, the YAS 480 is a logical next step. It's also a solid choice for adult hobbyists who have been playing a cheap instrument for a while and are finally ready to invest in something that won't require a complete overhaul after a year. On the other hand, absolute beginners who are just learning to assemble a mouthpiece and form a basic tone might still be better off with a true student model, one that's lighter, cheaper, and easier on a first-time budget. Likewise, professional players aiming for a concert-level instrument with custom ergonomics and a premium hand-engraved finish will likely skip the YAS 480 in favor of Yamaha's higher-tier series or a handmade alternative. In terms of drawbacks, the most common practical complaint is weight. The gold-finished body and solid brass construction add a few ounces compared to the ultralight student saxes, which can be noticeable during a long marching rehearsal. If you have a smaller frame, you might find the instrument a bit taxing after an hour of standing. Another nuance is that the included 4C mouthpiece, while serviceable, can feel restrictive when you try to push the sax into a bigger, more resonant sound. The instrument doesn't force you to upgrade, but many players report that the next step in tone quality comes with a higher-grade mouthpiece and maybe a different reed strength. Those are relatively low-cost tweaks, but they do add to the overall investment. Overall, the Yamaha YAS 480 feels like a smarter buy compared to the cheapest you can find route, precisely because it bridges the gap between student durability and intermediate performance. The combination of a reliable octave key, a finish that resists the wear and tear of daily practice.